10 deadly viruses and bacteria created in labs. Researchers are busy once more. This time, they're making new infections and microbes in their research facilities. Researchers normally incline toward modifying effectively existing or wiped out microorganisms and infections to deliver new strains that will overcome our insusceptibility, immunizations, and drugs. Sometimes, they favor making new infections and microbes without any preparation. In any case, these strains are not generally risky to people despite the fact that they could be dangerous to creatures like mice and even to different microscopic organisms. Number 10 is Horsepox. Researchers at the University of Alberta have made Horsepox, a deadly infection firmly identified with the similarly lethal smallpox. In contrast to smallpox, Horsepox doesn't influence people and is simply deadly to ponies. The researchers made the infection during a 6-month study supported by drug organization Tonix. The analysts bought DNA pieces by means of mail request and organized them to frame the infection. The whole undertaking was not costly. The DNA pieces used to make the infection cost just $100,000. The study caused a difficulty at the time it was uncovered. Different researchers were worried that administrations or even psychological militants could utilize the information to make smallpox infection for natural weapons. A smallpox scourge could turn out to be destructive for us today. We presently don't get immunized for it since we annihilated the infection in 1980. The analysts explained that they made the infection since they needed to create improved smallpox immunizations. Tonix later uncovered that it had created a smallpox immunization with the horsepox infection. Different researchers say that the specialists might have removed horsepox from wild pony populaces as opposed to making it without any preparation. Tonix said they would have done precisely that in the event that they had realized they had characteristic admittance to the infection. Be that as it may, lead analyst David Evans said they reproduced the infection in light of the fact that Tonix would have been not able to market the horsepox infection taken from nature. Number 9 is Black Death. Somewhere in the range of 1347 and 1351, a huge number of Europeans were tormented with a strange sickness that slaughtered more than 50 million individuals. Today, we realize this infection is the Black Death, which is brought about by the Yersinia pestis microbes. Albeit the Black Death is still near, it isn't just about as powerful as it used to be. A few years prior, specialists from a few schools, remembering the University of Tübingen for Germany and McMaster University in Canada, reproduced a destructive microorganisms from DNA tests extricated from the teeth of a casualty who kicked the bucket during the plague. They got just 30 milligrams of the microbes from the teeth, however that was sufficient to reproduce it. As an outcome, analysts affirmed the first microorganisms' relationship to the Black Death around today. A few researchers had guaranteed that the microscopic organisms were of various strains, however they are presently affirmed to be something very similar. The one we have around today just turned out to be less dangerous after it changed. Number 8 is polio. Like their partners at the University of Alberta, researchers at the State University of New York have made a dangerous fake infection by purchasing DNA pieces through mail request. This time, it is polio, and it is pretty much as intense as the common one. Mice presented to the counterfeit polio became ill similarly as they would have whenever presented to characteristic polio. The research center made polio was dubious among researchers. The specialists who created it had taken its code from information bases accessible to nearly anyone. Different analysts dread that individuals with ulterior intentions could build up their own fake polio, which is a lot simpler to make than other perilous infections like smallpox. Smallpox's hereditary code is 185,000 letters in length, while polio's is only 7,741 letters in length. Despite the fact that we are as of now near the precarious edge of annihilating polio, researchers dread that we will in any case should be inoculated against the sickness since it very well may be reproduced. Number 7 is Mousepox. A couple of years prior, analysts at the Australian National University and the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation (CSIRO) delivered a destructive transformed strain of Mousepox accidentally. Mousepox is another deadly infection that has a place with a similar family as horsepox and smallpox. The analysts were attempting to create anti-conception medication for mice at the time that they erroneously made the infection. They embedded a quality that advanced the production of interleukin-4, IL-4, into Mousepox, which they infused into certain mice. The mice were inoculated and shouldn't be hurt by the Mousepox. Instead of making the mice fruitless as analysts had expected, the debilitated infection turned deadly and obliterated the resistant frameworks of the mice, killing them in 9 days. The new Mousepox was risky to the point that it was impervious to inoculation. A big part of the other immunized mice presented to the changed Mousepox additionally died. The specialists were so frightened by their creation that they would not like to distribute their discoveries. They even met with the Australian military to affirm on the off chance that it was protected to publish. 4 Scientists dread that human smallpox could likewise change and become deadlier whenever infused with IL-4. Be that as it may, they are uncertain in light of the fact that nobody has attempted it yet. We know it won't be long until some researcher does. Number 6 is SARS 2.0. Serious intense respiratory disorder. SARS is a deadly infection. In excess of 700 individuals were slaughtered during a SARS scourge that contaminated 8,000 individuals in 29 nations somewhere in the range of 2002 and 2003. Presently, researchers have made it deadlier. The new freak SARS infection was made by a gathering of specialists drove by Dr. Ralph Baric of the University of North Carolina. They call it SARS 2.0. The scientists built up the infection by adding some protein to the normally happening SARS. SARS 2.0 is insusceptible to immunizations and medicines used to fix the normally happening SARS virus. 5 The group said that the exploration was vital in light of the fact that the characteristic SARS infection could change and get resistant to our antibodies. By making a deadlier and transformed infection, we could create more grounded immunizations that will save us from a more deadly SARS scourge. That is, if the normal SARS ever mutates. However, different researchers are concerned in light of the fact that the SARS 2.0 that should save us from a destructive SARS pandemic could begin that plague on the off chance that it at any point escapes from the lab. Number 5 is MERS-Rabies virus hybrid. Researchers have made a MERS-Rabies mixture infection. The thought is to utilize the infection to build up an immunization that will shield us from both infections. Rabies is a destructive sickness that can be communicated to people through the nibbles of contaminated canines that generally have the infection in their saliva. Middle East respiratory syndrome, MERS, is another infection that showed up in Saudi Arabia a couple of years prior. It is firmly identified with SARS and is spread from bats to camels and, at last, to people. MERS contaminated 1,800 individuals at the hour of its first plague and killed more than 630. Its casualty rate is around 35%. As we referenced in the past section, SARS tainted more than 8,000 individuals during a 2003 pestilence yet slaughtered a little more than 700. In spite of the fact that SARS caused more passings in total terms, it has a lower casualty rate than MERS. Just around 10% of SARS casualties passed on. Furthermore, for the time being, we don't have any immunization for MERS. To make the MERS-Rabies half and half, analysts took a few proteins from the MERS infection and added it to rabies. They utilized the new infection to build up another immunization that made mice impervious to rabies and MERS. They accept that the antibody can likewise be utilized for people and camels in danger of getting MERS. Number 4 is FIX174. FIX174 is another fake infection we have created in labs. It was made by specialists at the Institute of Biological Energy Alternatives in Rockville, Maryland. The scientists demonstrated the fake infection after the characteristic FIX infection. FIX is a bacteriophage, a class of infections that contaminate and eliminate microbes. Notwithstanding, it has no impact on humans. 7 The scientists made the fake infection in 14 days, yet it takes after the characteristic infection such a lot of that it is difficult to reveal to them separated. The specialists trust that the new infection is the initial phase in creating freak and counterfeit microorganisms that can be utilized to serve man. Number 3 is Unnamed. Virus analysts from University College London and the National Physical Laboratory have made an anonymous infection that eliminates microorganisms and carries on like a genuine infection. Like FIX174, it is a bacteriophage, however deadlier. The anonymous infection assaults any microscopic organisms around it. In practically no time, it breaks into more modest parts that append and make openings on the collections of the microbes. The openings immediately become bigger, constraining the microscopic organisms to release their substance. The microscopic organisms pass on soon after. Despite its startling intensity, the anonymous infection isn't hazardous to people and didn't assault human cells during tests. Be that as it may, it could enter human cells very much like common infections. Analysts trust the outcomes will be utilized to treat and study bacterial illnesses in people. The infection could likewise be utilized to adjust the human quality. Number 2 is bird flu. Some Dutch researchers have made a freak and deadlier form of the generally deadly bird influenza. Common bird influenza isn't effectively communicated among people. Notwithstanding, the specialists changed it, so it very well may be. To test their new infection, the analysts presented a few ferrets to it. Ferrets were picked on the grounds that they had comparable bird influenza side effects to humans. 10 ages later, the generally changed infection transformed again and got airborne. Normal bird influenza is anything but an airborne illness. The examination was questionable in the science local area. It turned out to be much more so when the Dutch specialists endeavored to distribute the interaction to make the destructive virus. 9 Although researchers dread that psychological militants could utilize the investigation to create a dangerous organic weapon that could slaughter a large portion of individuals on the planet, the scientists included say that the examination was important to permit us get ready for a transformed bird influenza pestilence. Number 1 is H1N1 virus. In 1918, the world saw the appearance of a dangerous influenza pestilence. This was the H1N1 infection. When it was finished, up to 100 million individuals were dead. Seasonal influenza made blood saturate the lungs of casualties. They delivered blood from their noses and mouths prior to suffocating in the blood inside their lungs. The influenza returned in 2009. However, it was less deadly despite the fact that it was changed and deadlier than it ought to have been. Researcher Yoshihiro Kawaoka took tests of the changed strain that made the 2009 scourge and utilized it to make a deadlier strain that was impervious to immunizations. This strain was like the one that caused the 1918 epidemic. 10 Kawaoka was not wanting to deliver a more deadly form of influenza at that point. He simply needed to make the first form of seasonal influenza so he could concentrate how it transformed and had the option to sidestep our insusceptibility. The destructive infection is put away in a lab and could get lethal if at any point delivered.